Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started this morning. Good morning. We are recording this webinar today, so thank you for joining us. This is our first Family Support Agency Coordinator webinar this year. My name is Carrie Beamer. I'm a pre-K specialist at the Department of Early Learning. I'll be working with you guys throughout the year on this project and coordinating the webinars and training. Also on the phone today is going to be Karen Gans, who is our Program Collaboration and Operations Manager. And we have Jess Robertson, who is a pre-K specialist with me. And we're also joined by Nikki Ruiz from Empath is with us this morning too. So we're really excited that she could join us. You guys should know after last year that if you have a question, you can just raise your hand, or if you have something to say, you can also ask us to be unmuted. It looks like we're a pretty small group this morning, so that should be fairly easy to do to have some more conversations about things. So feel free, please, to raise your hand and ask to be unmuted if you would like to share something. Okay, let's go ahead and look at our agenda for today. We are going to start out by reviewing some of the data that was collected this year in ELMS. We want to be able to share with you some of the things that we saw, maybe some trends, and just sort of give you an idea of what we did with the data that we were collecting last year. We also want to introduce this idea of when we have our webinars, we would love to have these sort of three standing topics that we would be talking about each time, along with maybe an overall bigger topic, but really focusing each time we're meeting on writing SMART goals, talking about executive function, and then talking about some poverty competency ideas. And then today we're also going to dig a little deeper, talk about SMART goal writing, talk about what we're going to be doing this afternoon with direct service providers. And then we also wanted to give you an update on the work that we'll be doing with the Prosperity Agenda this year as well. So before I get started, did anybody have anything else they want to address, or a thought or a question before we dive in? Doesn't look like it, so we'll go ahead and let's talk about the data. So last year was our first year that we did any data collection, and while we are still working on a full outcomes report, so none of this is really out there for public consumption yet because we are still finalizing our data. Some of these numbers were shared with the directors at the directors meeting at the beginning of the year. So in 2016, 2017, you can see that we had about 2,585 families that participated in both a pre and a post assessment in ELMS. And of these families, about 3,203 set some family goals. So that was about an average of 1.3 per family. And then when we looked at goal completion, so of those goals set, 1,583 reported that they had met their goals during the school year. Many of our families talked about how the development of goals was really important to them, that setting financial goals was something that they may not have done in the past, and it was nice to work with the family support staff about that. Most of our participants at some point commented that they plan on keep on working on their goals even though the school year is over. Another parent said, after ECAP support this year, it was easy for me to slow down and think about problems to a solution. And another parent said that they identified with people that they could talk to, and they knew where they could go for help. So I don't think any of that is too surprising for us that have been doing the work, that those comments would come from families. So this next slide, again, I just want to remind everybody that we're not done quite yet with our final outcome report, but one of the things that we looked at was children that were enrolled at sites using mobility mentoring had greater gains in language and literacy development than our other ECAP sites. And that was even when we controlled for poverty level, race, ethnicity, age, language, years of ECAP, length of day in the class, single parent education, and gold scores. Those children that their parents were in the mobility mentoring approach had greater gains in language and literacy. So we're pretty excited to see that data, and there's going to be more to come on that. And I would maybe just want to pause here, and and I'm sort of springing this on Nikki, but I'd be curious to know, Nikki, have you seen this before? If you had to think about a hypothesis of why those kids are doing better in language and literacy, do you have any? I'm putting you totally on the spot, so I'm sorry.
Okay. That's okay. I'm a good person to put on the spot because I think a lot about our intergenerational work. So no, I don't mind at all. And first off, congratulations on some wonderful outcomes coming out of that report. I got a glimpse at the draft, and it's really exciting to see. And I can tell you that we have not used the same kind of measurements as you all have, because we're not in early childhood setting, and so we don't measure the language and literacy as closely as you all do. But something that we have focused a lot on is the executive functioning. And we have seen the children in our Intergen kind of pilots in-house make some really exciting gains on their executive functioning. And so we use a tool called the Rothbard to measure that. And kids of all ages are really making some pretty exciting improvements in their executive functioning over the time that they're in our programs, even though we don't do anything that's specifically focused on improving their executive functioning. We're not doing any EF training or anything like that. But what I think it is, and I think that this ties, the same thing kind of might tie into the literacy and language development in the children, is mobility mentoring itself is a way of helping parents to practice a more interactive and more kind of thoughtful and deliberate way of kind of going about daily life and making plans and setting goals and strategizing out loud about what you intend to do and how you're going to do it. And I think my hypothesis is that carries over to the work with the children, right? So that maybe they're making these goals about their own finances, but then when it comes, it's the same kind of skills, right, that are necessary to be a good parent, being able to plan for the future, being able to prioritize and juggle a bunch of different things that are all coming up at the same time. And so my hypothesis would be that it's what we would probably see if we had the ability to measure is that there's an increase in what developmental folks call, serve and return, that kind of back and forth interaction between parent and child, which would be at the root of any improvements to their language and literacy. So that would be my best guess.
Yeah, thanks for chiming in on that. We are pretty excited to see what other data we can pull out of this. I just want to ask, I see that Estelle was, do you see, Estelle, are you still having problems with the screen, or are you back where we are at? Just let us know, either in the chat box or we can unmute you.
Hey, Carrie.
Yeah.
This is Karen Gans.
Hi, I didn't know you were on.
Yeah, so I can't get on the webinar. I don't know what's happened with my link. I just wanted you to know that I was here and that I've got the PowerPoint up on my computer.
Great. Well, since you're here, and I don't know if on this particular slide if there was any more that you wanted to add to this.
So here's the funny thing, I don't know what slide we're on.
Oh, okay. So we are talking about data, and so we're
Okay.
on number 4. We're on slide number 4, and we were just sort of thinking about, Nikki was talking about, or hypothesizing, what would it be that language and literacy, we saw that increase, and I tend to agree with you, Nikki. I think that it's probably that serve and return for sure.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I think that, I heard sort of the tail end of what you were saying, Carrie, and I would say that I think as we start to gather this information, it's really exciting, and of course what always ends up happening is that we have more questions then, right? We want to know the why behind some of the results that we're getting. And we're going to keep asking those whys so that we can really hone in on the pieces that are where movement's happening and what we can do to, continue to expand that.
Great. Okay, so I just wanted you guys to also know, you probably have already seen some different pieces to ELMS, but that this year you can register, you can give folks, you can assign them the family support role to anyone that you want to see that data. We're really excited that we got a Spanish version of the bridge up into ELMS, and there's a link there in ELMS that you can print it out. And then you can also view last year's Family Goals by Child report by selecting cumulative so that you can run your own reports. And the other thing that I wanted you guys to know is that us as a team, we meet with the ELMS team pretty regularly to figure out what data we want to pull from and what else can ELMS do for us. So it's really important for you guys to let me know if there is something that you wish, I wish ELMS could pull a report like this, or I wish we could, I think we need to keep data on this. You guys are the experts in the field, and feel free to contact me, give me a call, email me, and we can see what we can do about data. So I'm going to pause for just a minute to make sure that so far nobody has a question before we move on. Well, we'll keep moving. Here is our meeting schedule for the year. And as you can see, we have some really exciting topics. We did make a couple of changes since We sent this out originally, but we're really excited to work with Empath about doing some of these webinars with us. You will note that we don't have one in March because that is when we are planning to do our statewide training with the folks from Empath. Karen, do you have anything to add about meeting schedule?
Yeah, thank you, Carrie, for pulling that all together. So based on the feedback that we've heard from all of you over the years of doing this fabulous pilot together, we really determined that you let us know pretty clearly that a new contractor taking this on needs months in order to be able to, pull the information together, think about the changes that they're going to need to make, develop their training, all the different pieces that are going to come into place as they're adapting or, implementing this work and changing the way that they work with families as well. So we are going to have the Mobility Mentoring Essentials training for the rest of the state in March, and we'll probably be calling on some of you to come and help us with that so that they'll have some voices from the field around what you've done to be able to implement it, and we really know that having you be there in person will help with that. So if you're interested and willing to come and help us launch this across the rest of the state, let Carrie know, and then we'll keep a list and look at our budget and see who we're able to have join us at the March training. Since all of you have had the Essentials training, some of you have had it twice, and some once, we're thinking that you won't be coming in March because you've already got this dialed in. So if you have new staff that are going to be hired and who are going to be training on this and you would like to have them attend the training in March, also let us know that, because at this point we're not counting you in the count of those that will be trained in March. And then on a separate topic, I know that we talked in the past about the prosperity agenda and some possibilities of working with staff from the prosperity agenda around some specifics around coaching. And we got that idea from, I think there were a handful of you who heard the information that the prosperity agenda shared over a year ago at a WASA training at Summer Institute, and some of you went ahead and implemented some of these approaches, and we then started contacting them to gather some more information, and they let us know that this is very last minute, but someone canceled for them who they were scheduled to work with in December, and so we have an opportunity for them to potentially complete a one-day training with all of the agency coordinators, and December is right around the corner. So I think probably and December, as we all know, is a short month for us. So we're probably looking in early December, and I know Carrie has some monitoring conflicts during that time period, and so we're going to have to get clever around how we put some dates out to all of you to see if we're able to pull something off. I don't know that we're going to be able to do it, but Carrie, I'm thinking maybe a doodle poll. Does that sound like a good idea to you, to gather potential dates and try and schedule something on the days that it's a one-day training that most people can come?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so Carrie will pull that together and get it out to all of you, and we'll see if we can pull it off. And if we can't pull it off in December, then we'll talk with staff from the Prosperity Agenda about other times when we could potentially have the training happen. We'd rather have it happen sooner so that you have some time in your second or third year of implementing mobility mentoring to be able to really learn about some of these specific techniques that they've developed and be able to share them with your staff and see how it ends up helping them. We know we got rave reviews from Beth Mizell and her team at Snohomish County about the supports that are offered through the Prosperity Agenda coaching training that they have.
Hey, great. So one of the things that we had thought about is every agency quarter meeting having a standing topic and having us really be intentional about talking about these three subjects. And it was actually based on some of our conversations that we've been having with our empath partners. And one of the things that they do regularly in their meetings is look at SMART goals and actually even think of a topic or a subject and then break it down, like how would you write that? Maybe Nikki, since you're, again, don't you just love that I just put you on the spot, but when we had talked to Jennifer, we thought it was such a great idea, and having that as a subject so that if going back to school is a goal, then really getting intentional, like how are you writing that, and really doing practice writing SMART goals. Is that, did I do that right? Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Is that what you?
Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit about what we've been doing at empath. We started, let's see, probably 18 months ago or so, having what we call our mobility mentoring practitioners meetings with our entire direct service staff. We have them once a month. And what we've done this year, because we realized that the goals are something that is always, people always need more work on. You know, goals are probably the trickiest part of this work. It's hard to, you know, figure out how to write the right kind of goals and how to make them, you know, because there's so many different, factors involved in what kinds of goals you're going to write for people. And so this fiscal year, we've dedicated the entire year to, focusing just on goals in these meetings. And so, but what we've done is actually, it sort of aligns with two of your standing topics, both the SMART goals and also the poverty competency, if I'm understanding poverty competency right. So in addition to focusing on a skill set in goal setting at each of our meetings, so for example, we had one of our meetings was really about sort of developing longer term goals and then tying those back into shorter term goals. So that's what I would kind of think of as a a goal setting skill. And then each of the trainings also focused on a competency or a sort of an area of expertise, right? And so we use the bridge pillars in order to kind of sort out the important things that we want people to know. So, for example, with the long-term goals, we talked about budgeting because that's something that, we have a lot of folks in our programs who are homeless, and in order to, successfully over the long term, attain permanent housing and stay permanently housed, saving and budgeting is something that folks really need to have. And so, so anyway, yeah, each of our practitioners meetings has had one sort of like skill set that people are working on, and that's, some aspect of goals, developing goals, and then one kind of area of competency around one of the bridge pillars, or something that has to do with the bridge pillar. So, for example, last month we did one on working with undocumented participants because, while it's not a specific bridge pillar, it does sort of play into many of the bridge pillars, and talked about, how to create specific goals with undocumented participants on various pillars of the bridge. And so that's what we've been doing this year, and it's been going well. I think that folks, for the folks that are doing the work, they really appreciate having the kind of more concrete resources and things like that, talking about, the specific bridge pillars and the information around those, because that's going to immediately help them in their work with participants. And then for those of us who are, supervisory staff, and we know that staff kind of needs some more of the skill building around how to actually do goals, it's great that that's in there as well. People have a chance in these meetings to practice together. We do a lot of small group activities so that folks have a chance to practice. And so it really kind of hits both of those, the needs of, kind of both sets of staff at the same time.
Great, thank you for talking about that. So that's sort of our same hope, is that during this agency coordinator meeting, we'll take some time to really quickly maybe pick a subject and talk about SMART goals. We're going to pick a piece of executive function, talk about it, and pick a piece of poverty competency and talk about it every time we meet.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And if you all would be interested, I could certainly send you the plan for the year that we've developed for, all of the goal setting meetings. It'll have the title of the, the training, and then the learning goals associated with it, if that's something that you'd be interested in, just to see how we broke it down. Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. Karen, do you have anything to add before we move on?
Yeah, no, I don't think that I have anything to add. I really appreciate the offer of sharing what you all have developed, Nikki, so that we can just build on that and then share it with the agency coordinators, as well as they think about how they're going to potentially implement something like this in their work with staff as well. So thanks.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to take a quick poll. Now, what we wanted to ask is a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being very confident and 5 being an expert. How do you feel you could rate yourself as a skilled SMART goal writer? Must have not worked. So
it's all good, Carrie. How about people just write in the chat box where they see themselves? And I think I would change the question just a little bit around versus instead of being a SMART goal writer, a SMART goal teacher, because that's really what they're doing, is they're teaching people, or they're supporting people in writing SMART goals. So how confident are you feeling as someone who's supporting staff in writing SMART goals?
Feel like they're a 4, a 3, a 2.
It's a 4, a 3, and a 4 are what I saw in the chat box. So it looks like we got open another 4.
Great. So it sounds like you guys are feeling fairly confident about being able to teach others about writing SMART goals. So this afternoon, when we are meeting with direct support folks, we're going to be kind of reviewing SMART goals again. I think Nikki's right. I think that this is something that we can never talk about enough, and many of us were on a webinar that they did in May of last year, where we talked about writing SMART goals, again, making them specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. During our discussions, we've found that there are some common challenges that people have writing SMART goals. I think one of the most common mistakes is not using that SMART goal format. Another one is potentially so many action steps that you need to take to attain that goal, or sometimes very, very few action steps to attain that goal. And one of the things that we had heard during that webinar was MPAP had really given us some direction that if the goal is so large that you need more than 3 action steps to attain that goal, then you need to break that goal down. So, for example, I know that looking at ELMS myself, that there were a lot of really big goals like owning your own home, and so you would have to take maybe up to 10 to 12 steps before you could own your own home. And we really want folks to be thinking about what can be done during this time that they are with us in ECAP. Is it maybe not owning your own home, but potentially figuring out where your credit score is and how much you would have to save to have a down payment. That's just a very broad example. Nikki, do you have anything to say about that? About maybe just about how revisiting SMART goals is something that you guys are continually working on with your direct support staff?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that was important for us was to identify, and hopefully when I send you the document, it will help with this, but one of the things that was important was not just to kind of go back over the SMART criteria for goals, right? Because after a while, the staff were like, yeah, no, we know, specific, measurable, attainable.
Right. We got it.
They're sort of like, yeah, we got it. But there's so much more to goal setting than that. And so, for example, like one of the things that we focused on was how to create goals that align with both our program goals and contract requirements and that are relevant to the participant, right? So that's like a particular skill in goal setting, and it has to do with the R part of SMART, right? It's relevant. It's relevant to the program. It's relevant to the participant. But it's, it's diving in a bit deeper to that aspect of the SMART criteria, and so that staff don't feel like every single meeting we're just like kind of going back over that SMART criteria.
Right.
And so, yeah, just like how to kind of frame it in a way that staff are going to say, oh, I haven't heard this before. We don't want staff to kind of just keep feeling like, oh, it's the same information you keep giving me, even though, it may be something that they really do need to practice. It's just trying to figure out how to keep staff kind of excited to learn new things. And so that was something that we have found to be pretty successful so far, is, yeah, just breaking down the different aspects of it. And then, like I mentioned before, making sure that each time we're also focusing on giving them some, information that they can immediately start using in their work around the different bridge pillars. And so, introducing them to new resources and, things like that has been helpful too, because then the staff really feel like, oh, this has been useful. This has been worth my time.
Great, thanks. So the next slide that I have, I just wanted to share some of the data that we collected last year. So the kind of the darker blue graph at the top is some of the issues that we saw sort of the least amount of movement from pre to post assessment. And then the lighter blue column rows at the bottom are where we saw sort of significant gains in these totals. So if you look at like education attainment, during the assessment statewide, most people came in, the average was a 2.3, and when they left, it was a 2.3. When it was legal issues, we had folks in at 4.6, they left at 4.7. Housing was 3.8, they left at 3.9, and earning levels 2.5, when they left it was 2.7. Versus some of these other subjects, at the bottom you can see like school involvement, becoming involved in your child's school, advocating for your child. Folks were in at 3.4, left at about 4. community resource knowledge, so coming in at about 3.8, leaving at 4.3, and healthy lifestyles 3.6 and leaving at 4.0. So I'm curious out there if hearing this information, if somebody on the call or Nikki or Karen or Jess, anybody has a comment or an aha or how come these particular topics we saw significant change and these other areas had very little growth? Anybody want to chime in?
Can I ask a quick question? This is Nikki.
Sure.
Have you looked at all at the area or domain that the goals have been set in? So this is just kind of like the outcomes, right? The changes that folks actually made. But one of the things that we do at Empath is we break down and we look at how many goals have been set in each pillar of the bridge, and like what percentage of the goals that are set are attained in each pillar of the bridge. And that gives us a nice kind of clear view of potentially, are there areas that staff are less comfortable in, and so they're just not setting goals in those areas. And then, if they are setting goals and they just aren't being achieved, we can kind of like look at, do we need to develop more resources around that thing? But, looking at this list, I'm not surprised that education attainment, legal issues, housing, and earnings level are all, having less movement, because those are all things that take a really long time to achieve. You don't get higher education attainment in just, 1 year. If you're taking on a new associate's degree program or something like that, you're not going to actually see any movement, until later on down the road. It's going to take a lot longer. And so it's not surprising to me, but I would be really interested to see, like, where are people actually setting goals, and then what percentage of the goals in each pillar are being attained. If that's, I don't know if that's possible in your system, but.
I don't know that either, but we are still building our system, so if it's something that you guys have done and found really valuable, then I think that it's possible for us to do it as well.
Yeah, so just to give you a concrete example, a year or two ago, we realized that there were very few goals being set in the finance pillar. And of the goals that were being set, very few were being attained, compared to the other pillars. And so we realized, this is obviously something that staff are not comfortable doing. And so we put a lot more energy into, building staff capacity around the finance pillar. We did a lot of training on, how do you do budgeting with participants? How do you encourage savings? How do you do pull credit scores? And all of these different aspects. We kind of really dove into it with staff, because we realized that that was how we were able to realize that the staff weren't really doing it.
Yeah, and I'll just say that Estelle also agreed and said, maybe because things like education, it's such a large goal, we wouldn't see that big, any kind of change in that area. My other thought that I had about why we saw pretty significant change in some of the other ones is I think our staff in the field are really, really good at involving families and showing them and teaching them how to be advocates for their children. I think they're really good at sharing community resources and making sure families know that, along with healthy lifestyle. So I can see how, like you were talking about, Nikki, if it's difficult to talk about finances, you probably wouldn't see a big change or not even a goal set, but you're really good about knowing all of the resources in your community. You would see that family make some change in that area. Did anybody else want to raise their hand and comment on this?
Carrie, it looks like Estelle had another thing she wanted to say. She said, I do look at the report that shows what goals each staff made with participants to see if there is one they are comfortable with and some that they are not.
Hey, this is Karen. I'm wondering how many other people out there are doing that. How many of you are looking at the goals that have been set and then doing a little bit of analysis to see, what kind of areas staff may be more comfortable in setting goals versus others? Is there anyone else out there doing that as well?
And you can also raise your hand and we'll unmute you if it's easier than typing in the chat box.
So while we're waiting for that, I'll just talk about something else around this. I think that, if we end up not hearing back from many people, then that's a great thing for us to be able to make sure that we try and build in ELMS for people, which is that, percentage of goals set per pillar, the idea that Nikki shared with us today, and seeing what we can do to make sure that we are making that easy for you to be able to look at that and then be able to loop back to staff around the areas where they set the most goals with families. I think, the school involvement and advocacy, community resources, and healthy lifestyle, I also think those are 3 areas where staff have been already setting goals for some of them many years with families on those areas. And I think that I'm wondering if part of the reason that they're showing more confidence is not just about the staff expertise level, but also because the staff are feeling more confident and comfortable in it, they're able to without thinking about it, write more SMART goals in that area. So that could be another piece of analysis that we could potentially do as well, would be to see what are the areas where the most SMART goals are written, and then see if there are any patterns that emerge that are similar to this or not.
And it looks like Estelle shared a little more. She said, I found 2 to 3 had a set of very diverse goals, and some family service specialists or sports specialists set primary goals in 1 or 2 areas, but then that gave her a platform to talk with the staff about how they discuss the bridge with the parents.
Thank you, Estelle. So that kind of leads into our next slide. We were just sort of what Karen was already talking about. We're wondering how do you monitor SMART goal writings, and what kind of coaching have you given your staff on certain topics? What did you find that really worked for you, or what may not have worked for you? Is anybody willing to let us unmute you and share this?
Looks like we've got 1 hand raised, and that is Estelle. So Estelle, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead,
so
Estelle.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, very good, thank you. So I like to use the report, and I can't remember in my head exactly which report it is, so I've been sitting here thinking what's my avenue to get to it. But so if you go to the report that shows all the goals that have been set by families at a particular site, then you can see the work that the family supports have done to get those goals set. And so I like to go and just monitor what goals they are setting, because I realize that I think one of the most important pieces of our work is learning how to listen to families very carefully and stay curious enough so that you can so that the family supports can help the parents set goals that are important to them, not necessarily goals that are comfortable for the family support. But that's a process, and there's a learning curve involved in that. But you can kind of monitor that using that report and see which family supports are learning how to help, are learning that skill so that there's a more diversity in the goals that they are setting with families.
Thank you, Estelle, for that.
It looks like we also have some responses from Mary. Mary says that she's found that housing seems to be the area that most of the coordinators are working on with families. And then she likes to report on child and goals.
Thanks, Mary. Okay. Nikki or Karen, do you have anything else to add about that?
No, I don't think that I have anything to add right now.
All right. So this afternoon, again, we kind of talked about this already, but we are going to be spending some time talking about SMART goals again, and sort of like Nikki said, trying to give you guys an avenue or a venue to bring this up in a way that you're not continually saying SMART goals are specific, measurable, you know, that you're revisiting how to write those goals and whether or not in particular areas or subjects that we can kind of coach and give advice on how to write up some of those much larger things like immigration, college, and housing. I think for us, the tricky part is that data collection, right? Because if somebody is writing a goal that again you can see in our data that they want to attend college or complete a BA, that's not that's a 5-year process, right? So I'm thinking about how to break those really bigger overarching goals into smaller pieces. So hopefully we'll be talking a little bit more about that this afternoon too.
Actually, Carrie, I have a question that I'd love to ask everyone to think about and then, you know, have a conversation about together, and that is really asking them what they find their biggest barriers to be in supporting staff in setting SMART goals. Because when we look at the goals that are set in ELMS, there clearly are some that are SMART goals, and there are many that are not SMART goals. And so when you see that, you know, what are you, so I guess I'm asking two questions. When you're looking at that and you see that staff are writing goals that are these really large, long-term goals because the family has said, what I want to do is buy a house or whatever it may be, that, you know, what are you doing to help staff be able to then loop back to families and work to have it be a smarter goal? And what are some of the biggest barriers that you're facing when you're doing that?